Okay, so before we begin, even before I introduce myself, I'm going to do a very quick centering exercise, because we've all been off and wandering around and listening to all sorts of things. So I'm going to do, it will literally take a couple of minutes, but you will need to give me 100% of your attention. So what I'm going to do is, this is an activity. When I speak tomorrow, I'm going to talk much more about how you can integrate mindfulness into your lives and into your classrooms. All of the activities that I do through this talk are things that you can then repeat at home or with your students. And this is a particularly simple mindful activity that you can do even with incredibly young children. Okay, so you just need to listen. He will give you the instructions, you just need to follow the instruction. It's great because I just get to stand and listen with all of you. I'm just looking to see if everybody's eyes are open. Okay, so you can see from that's a really simple activity that is excellent to do especially if you're transitioning from one activity to another, because literally what it does is it brings everybody's attention to that sound. And the more we could go on and do this 4 or 5 times, and if I was doing this for the first time with a group of children, I would repeat that exercise. Because what you will find is that the more you do it, the longer they will hear the sound of the bell ringing. And of course, the first couple of times you do it with children, often they'll sneak a little peek to see what everybody else in the classroom is doing. And obviously you'll get the children who will start humming to see whether everybody responds to that. So it's a bit of fun, but it's a really effective way of teaching children to listen to something and completely focus on that one thing. So during my presentation today and my presentations tomorrow, I will do a variety of different mindfulness activities with you, so you can see what types of things that you can do. And I'll also, I've mentioned this to the young man earlier, I'll also recommend some places where you can find mindfulness activities for yourselves so that you can find something that works for you, because it is a very personal practice. Okay, so you'll see from the bottom of my slide there that it says mindful parenting. So before I do my presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey to mindfulness and the way that I work with mindfulness. So my background is that I'm a child, adolescent and family therapist. That's my clinical background. I always worked as a therapist in schools. I was a school counsellor. So I worked in schools for 15 years. First in the UK, and then I moved to Dubai 11 years ago, and I started working as a school counsellor in a British school in Dubai. It's a through school, so it's from kindergarten all the way through to year 13. So children from the ages of 3 to 18 or 19. So I worked with all of those children of those ages, and I was the first school counsellor they'd ever had. It was a brand new school when I worked there, and I was there for 8 years. Now, during my time working in schools in the UK and Dubai, I always ran workshops for parents. The reason for that being is that I felt that whenever you're working with children and adolescents, there's some other really, really important people in their lives. And those are, yes, the teachers that teach them, but also their parents at home. And if you really want to make a difference in a child's life, involving their parents in anything you do, for me, has always been the key to really making that difference. And a couple of words that have been spoken already: empowering. You know, I really feel my primary role is to empower teachers and parents, to educate them, to teach them things that they can then go and use in their day-to-day lives with their children. So the work that I now do is primarily with parents through a business that I have called Mindful Parenting. And then I also go and work in schools with teachers as well. And that combination I find is very good. So whilst I do miss, I feel quite jealous of you talking about you working with your students, also I do miss that interaction with children and adolescents. I do find that working with parents and teachers has had a huge impact, and I see that. So primarily what I'm going to talk to you about today is a bit about what mindfulness is. So can I ask you, just by a show of hands, if you raise your hand if you think you know anything about mindfulness? I just want to sort of gauge who the experts are in the room, who I can get to come and give this talk instead of me. Okay, so the few people have heard of it. So what I'm going to do is just talk mainly today about what it is. Okay, and then tomorrow I'm going to talk much more about how you can integrate it at home and in the classroom. But I want us to all be on the same page to begin with, so we have an understanding of what it is and what it isn't. Because I think there are some common misconceptions about mindfulness. Now, I started practicing mindfulness around about probably 13 or 14 years ago now. I found a little reference to it in this little, magazine that you get. I think it was from the British Psychological Society or something like that. And I found it talked about in a little paragraph. And as I'm one of these people who likes to try new things, I thought, I think I'm going to give that a go. This sounds quite interesting. I found I was a period in my life where I had 3 young children. I have 3 sons, by the way. And I was working a full-time job, and I'm going to be honest, I was quite stressed. Life was pretty stressful. When you talked, both of you, a lot this morning about self-regulation, the ability to manage our own emotions. I wasn't doing very well at that. I was not very good at managing my emotions at all. And I knew that it was really important. I knew that I wanted to teach my children how to manage their emotions. And I knew that I was the role model, because I kept being told that. Do you hear that a lot? Yeah? That you're the role model for your children. So I knew, and I thought, okay, so I'm going to have to get better at this. I'm going to have to be better at managing my own emotions so I can teach them how to manage their emotions. So mindfulness for me, the reason I started it, I'm going to be honest, I didn't start practicing it for my students. I started practicing it for myself. And I've had some quite amazing discoveries. I realised that it actually really helped me to stay much calmer, that it improved my self-regulation. I became a much calmer, much more relaxed parent at home. And that change for me personally led me to then start using that in my professional and clinical life. And it was from there that I started to use it with my students. So I taught it to students in school. I taught it to some of the teachers as well, and it became something that we incorporated into our school life. And that was way before it became something that was really, these days you can pick up any magazine and it talks about mindfulness. But it isn't a fad, but it is something that we need to practice. And it's something we do every single day. So mindfulness, in its most simple sense, and you put this definition, I think, in one of your slides, Dr. Huda, as well, is being aware of or bringing our attention to this moment in time deliberately. So it's a conscious decision to do it, and it's without any judgment. Any judgment of what? When we talk about judgment, what are we talking about there? How many of you, when you were sat listening to that bell, how many of you were sitting there thinking about something else? Yeah? Your mind was probably wandering. You might even have been thinking, why is this strange woman asking us to listen to a bell? Like, what is that about? And you might have been thinking, this is really difficult. I'm really struggling to just concentrate on this bell. I'm thinking about, what time is it? What am I going to give my children for dinner? How long is it going to take me to get home? When are we going to get fed? Is there any coffee outside? Our mind wanders, doesn't it? And then we judge ourselves because we're like, what is the matter with me? Why can't I focus on this? Why am I not able to just listen to this bell? So mindfulness is about training ourselves to focus on one thing, whatever that thing is. And in the example I gave you, it was a bell, but I'm going to give you some others. And not to judge the thing that we've chosen to concentrate on, or to judge ourselves, because our minds will wander. When I first learnt mindfulness, one of the things I used to think about was having a puppy. Has anyone in this room ever had a puppy? Okay. Have you ever had one of those extendable leads? Where the puppy goes out and then you have to get it back, and you might sometimes, if you're feeling generous, you'll offer it a reward to come back, but sometimes you just give it a little tug on the lead, don't you, to get it to come back. And eventually, after a period of time, you've trained it to come back when you call it. Well, mindfulness is a bit like that. It's like your brain is this puppy, okay, and it wanders off. And it finds things that are interesting, like puppies like to smell things, yeah? So your mind is a bit like that. It goes wandering. And what you do is you start to train it to keep coming back. But you don't train it to come back by criticizing or judging, because our brains don't like to be criticized or judged. You train it to come back just by practicing on focusing your attention back on the thing that you were decided to focus on. So when you practice mindfulness, if your mind wanders, I should say when your mind wanders, because it will wander, the important thing is just bring your attention back and don't worry about it wandering. The purpose of it is not to focus on your mind wandering, it's to focus on bringing your attention back to whatever it was you wanted to learn to focus on. Does that make sense, yeah? So there's no such thing as being good or bad at mindfulness. There's no judgment in it. My ability to focus for 10 minutes doesn't mean I'm better than any of you, okay? And the really interesting thing is you'll notice some days it's really easy to focus and some days it's really difficult. And that in itself is just something to be curious about. Okay, so as I said, we can use it in lots of different ways. And the thing I really liked about mindfulness is that, unlike the gym, because lots of people use exercise as a way of de-stressing. Unlike that, it doesn't require a membership. I don't have to go anywhere special. I don't need a special outfit. And I don't have to tell everybody else about it. So you can literally practice mindfulness anywhere, any time of the day, in any outfit. It makes no difference. And you can incorporate it into your daily life. And this is the thing that I loved about it the most. Does anybody in this room have a spare 30 minutes on a daily basis that they could just do anything with? Oh, a couple of people do. Okay. I mean, it's unusual. You know, we don't often have 30 minutes, do we? If I was to ask the question again, does anybody in this room have a spare 3 minutes a day that they could find to do something? Would we get more hands in the air? Yeah? 3 minutes. If I was to tell you this only takes 3 minutes a day, you can spend longer if you want, but you don't have to. And even better, you can just use something that you already do. You can pick an activity, and it could even be washing up, by the way. Yeah, washing up, walking your dog, having a shower, eating, drinking a cup of tea. Any of those things that you already do on a daily basis, you can do in a more mindful way. So you don't even have to find extra time. All you could do is just pick one thing that you already do and choose to do it in a slightly different way. And do you think that you could all do that? Okay. Does anybody here thinking, no, I could not do that and I don't want to? Okay, so it's possible. Yeah? Because the first thing we have to decide is that it's possible. We have to make a decision to do something different before that thing will even happen. Okay, so it is something that is recommended by many different medical societies. And in the UK, we have something called the National Health Service, which basically is free medical care that's provided by the government. So you can imagine that what they choose to do with the money that they spend, they need quite a lot of persuasion to believe that it's worth the government spending money on something. So in the UK, mindfulness is actually provided on the NHS. They actually train people to practice mindfulness as part of their overall health and well-being. So if you were referred in the UK on the National Health Service for CBT, for example, or DBT, or any form of therapy, it may well include an element of mindfulness in it. Because what they found is that mindfulness, particularly when used in combination with other forms of therapy, is very effective at changing people's emotional states, at making us calmer and happier. So this is taken from the NHS website. When regularly implemented, mindfulness can lead to benefits such as increased calm and relaxation, higher levels of energy and enthusiasm for life, increased self-confidence and self-acceptance, less danger of experiencing stress, depression, anxiety, chronic pain, addiction, or low immune efficiency, and more self-compassion and compassion for others. If that was a pill, we'd all be taking it, wouldn't we? If there was a tablet we could take on a daily basis that would give us all of those things, nobody in this room would have any problem with taking it. Is that true? Okay, and it's even better than that because it's not even a tablet that you need to take. There is no negatives to it. That's the positive thing about it. And it's completely free. And there's not many things in this life that are really good for you and free, are there? And you don't put on weight either. So Dr. Hoodie will have no problem getting into that red dress, okay? Because it doesn't make you put on weight. So it's something that is good for you and doesn't make you fat. I mean, it just doesn't get much better, does it, really? Okay? So it's considered to be cheap, effective, and a doable intervention for stress-filled lives, as well as a skill that can prevent mental health issues. So it's not just something that we can do to feel better, it's also something we can do to prevent ourselves from suffering with stress or insomnia or any of those things. In fact, most weight, if you were to look at any type of weight management practice these days, it will include an element of mindfulness. You know when they say things to you like, when you eat your food, you need to eat it slowly and you need to really concentrate on what you're eating and put your cutlery down and all of those things. That's mindful eating. Okay? That's basically what it is. How many of you, when you're eating, are doing something else at the same time? Yeah? Okay, and the problem with that is that it means that your brain isn't really focusing on eating. So a lot of the time it doesn't realise when it's full up. And that's one of the reasons we overeat, is because we actually don't hear the messages that our brain is telling us to stop eating. It also means that we eat too quickly, and it also means we're not concentrating on the food that we're putting in our bodies. One of the biggest changes that happened in my life when I started practicing mindfulness is that I changed the way I ate. I actually became a vegan. Do you know what that means, a vegan? Okay. Now, this is not because I'm some crusading, and I'm not anti anybody who eats meat or anything like that, but I really start to think about what I was putting in my body. Like, I really thought about it. And it didn't happen on the first day, but over a period of time, the more I thought about what I was putting in my body, the more I decided that I wanted to change what I was putting in my body. So I never made a conscious decision to change my eating habits. But over a period of a number of years, they just sort of changed by themselves. And then I realised one day that apparently I was now a vegan. Only because one of my friends told me, do you know that the fact that you eat these things and you don't eat those means that you're a vegan? And I was like, really? Wow. I never realised I didn't know there was a label for it, but apparently that's what it is. So when it can have changes that you don't even know it was going to have. So it's currently being applied in a wide range of non-clinical situations as well as clinical situations. And those are things like educating parents, the way that we educate parents to be with their children, in schools, in universities, at home, and in the workplace. I also do quite a lot of mindfulness work in companies, particularly lawyers. I don't know why that is, but I seem to get a lot of phone calls from solicitors who want me to come and do mindfulness work with Is anybody in this room a lawyer? Just checking that I'm not going to offend. That's lucky. Okay, so I don't know why that is. But in schools, why do you think mindfulness is something that's becoming very popular in schools? There's quite a few teachers in this room, isn't there? Yeah? So you're going to know the answer to this question. Can you shout it out at me, or do we need is there a microphone floating around it, or do you think you can speak loudly? The gentleman there in the apricot shirt, your hand went up. Why do you think mindfulness is more popular in schools?
I think looking at its benefits makes it more popular. I think it's good for the students.
Yeah. What about for teachers? Why would mindfulness be so popular for teachers? It's a really stressful job, isn't it? Yeah? Being a teacher, working with children and parents. Yeah? Yeah? It's a really stressful job. Okay? So anything, and the expectations on teachers and parents is huge, isn't it? I mean, you're just expected to fix the world's problems, yeah? It's all on you. Okay? It's incredibly stressful. Before I became a therapist and I worked in schools, I was a stockbroker. You may not believe that. I was a stockbroker. I worked in the City of London. Okay? I used to invest people's money. Don't ask me, I don't do it anymore, okay? But that's what I used to do. I used to travel up on the train to London, on the tube, in my suit, you know, balancing a newspaper and a cup of coffee on the tube, and that's what I did for almost 10 years. I thought that was stressful. Then I worked in a school. Way more stressful. And it doesn't pay as well, either. So I think one of the reasons why this is becoming so popular and talked about in schools, yes, it's great for kids, and I will talk about that a lot more tomorrow. But what I really want you to think, it's good for you. You know, anything that we can do to decrease stress in our lives has got to be a positive thing, hasn't it? Because stress is so damaging for our brains, it's so damaging for our bodies. So for me, if I can do something that's going to help manage my stress, and there's no negatives to it, it's free, and I don't put on any weight, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. Okay, so I'm a bit worried that this is going to start playing, actually, before I'm ready. It is. Hold on 1 second. I'm just going to run over here.
The human brain is a profoundly complex organ.
Okay. I know you've seen lots of pictures of brains, and you've had two people way more qualified than me to talk about the brain. But this video that I'm going to show you, I found that this was a really simple way for me to understand how mindfulness helps change the structure of your brain. Okay, it doesn't just make you feel better, it actually changes the way that your brain works. If you practice mindfulness regularly over a period of time, what they've actually seen through MRI scans is that the structure of the brain changes. Which is quite amazing, really, isn't it? That the power of our thoughts can change what our brains look like. So this short video is about something called neuroplasticity. I'm not going to say that word again quickly. And really that's all about how the brain changes, okay? And I think she explains it way better than me, and I know my limitations. So I'm going to let you watch this short video, and then I will talk about it, and I'm happy to take questions, because I think it's really important to understand this before we move on to the next section, okay?
90% of its activity occurs beneath conscious awareness, which means that even though we assume that we have some control of how we think, feel and behave, modern science suggests it's not so simple. The concept of neuroplasticity is a new and exciting area of science. It highlights that our brain is constantly being reshaped throughout our lives by both our experiences and our thoughts. We now know that it is the focus of our awareness that determines which brain networks are strengthened and which are weakened or lost. That means that when we get caught up in cycles of worry or irritability, these are the networks within the brain that become stronger. So the more we worry, the better we become at worrying. However, on the other side of this, if we practice being calm, clear and focused, we can strengthen these networks too. As humans, our brain differs from other animals. This is mostly due to the front areas of the brain called the frontal lobes, often called the new brain, as it was the last to develop in our evolution.